Hello everybody, Tom Morley here from FOSS 365, where we use free open source software 365 days a year. A lot of people may not know it, but I like to do astrophotography. So I saved up a bit of money. I picked up the Orion SkyQuest 8-inch telescope and an adapter for my Sony a6300, and I've been shooting the moon probably for about a year and a half now. So I've been posting the pictures that I've been creating on Facebook groups that I'm part of, and somebody asked me if I would share how I process the pictures in the software I use, which of course that software is going to be free, and it's called Darktable. So I'm going to slide this part in because I realized that I didn't cover the import of the images. Even though I covered that in the Darktable intro video, I thought it'd be important to put it in here just so that you know the complete process. When you first open Darktable, you'll be in the light table section here. And if you want to open a certain folder full of pictures, then you click on the folder button here and then open the folder, click open. And when you do, you will get a tabbed out version of all the images in the file manager here, and you can slide this. I usually set it at least 4 pictures wide. That way I can use my mouse button to scroll through. But that's how you import the images so that you can process them. Back to me. Okay, so this is how I process my moonshots. Here we have a finished product of one of my moonshots. So let's jump to the one right next to it that has no processing done to it whatsoever. So let's double left click on that, and you'll see that it basically looks like a flat moon. We don't have any color, any detail, or anything. So the first thing that I want to do is probably crop into this. So I'm going to go over to the basic group button over here, and I'm going to click on it. And that's going to give us these modules here. And I want crop and rotate. So I'm going to left click on crop and rotate. You may or may not have these guidelines. If you look at the guides here, you can change the guides to rule of thirds, or you can do diagonal method, or basically anything you want. But what I'll probably do, you could use any of these, but I kind of like the metering for lining the moonshots up. So once the crop and rotate is selected, you can grab a corner and you can start to manipulate the corners to get the moon about where you want it. I'm going to go with the larger tabs there, the top and bottom, and it looks like I'm fairly close left to right. I'm going to call that close enough. I'm going to left click on the crop and rotate again. And now it'd be nice if I probably had some color. So let's click on the contrast, brightness, and saturation on. Let's pump the saturation up. And you'll see it change a little bit, but because the moon is so bright, we're going to have to do a little more than moving the saturation all the way up. And normally, I wouldn't use a slider to its max. I wouldn't move that all the way to one side. But to get some color out of the moon, because it's so washed out and it's so bright, we're going to not only move the saturation over to the right as much as we can, but we're going to ask for some extra help from a couple other modules that are in Darktable. So we're going to go over to where it says color group, and you'll see a vibrance, and you'll see a Velvia, I guess it's called. If you don't see one or both of these modules available for you to use, remember that down here at the bottom, you can always click this little arrow where it says more modules. And if it's not up here already, you can scroll through here and grab the vibrance and Velvia modules from down here. And when you click on them, it'll put them up here in your color group selection. So let's left click on vibrance. We're going to move that all the way up. You'll see that help again. And same thing with the Velvia. We're going to move that strength all the way up. Now you're starting to see some color in here, but it's still washed out. So what's washing this out on us? Basically, there's a haze, right, of shine over the whole moon. So it'd be nice if we could get rid of the haze on this picture, and you can. In Darktable, there's a haze module. So let's go over, I think it's in the correction group, and it is. I'm going to go over to the correction group, and I'm going to left click on the haze removal, and I'm going to click on this strength and move it up a little bit. And as soon as I did that, you'll see that it actually did remove some of the total glare off from the whole moon. And if you want to turn it off and on and see the difference, just come here to the power button for the module. And if I click it, you'll see that now the haze is there. And I click the button again and the haze is removed. That gives you the ability to kind of see the difference of the effects that you're applying to your picture. So I definitely want to use that haze removal on there. I'm going to use the left mouse button. I'm going to move it up a little bit to get a little bit closer in here. And I see that everything's kind of soft, so I want to sharpen that up. Seeing how I'm already in the correction group, right? Correction group button. I see sharpen, so I'm going to left click on sharpen. I'm going to grab the amount, and because this is a raw file and it's 24 megapixels, I'm going to move this amount as well all the way to the right. What did it sharpen? It just sharpened the real fine details. So if I want to sharpen more of the broader details of the moon, I have to hit the radius section and I have to move that up. And that's where you'll start to see a change in your picture a little bit more than you saw in the fine details. So now if I hit the button, you can definitely see a difference between the sharpness when I turn it on and off. Again, because this is 24 megapixels and it's a raw file, I have a lot to play with. So what I would like to do is probably sharpen that even a little bit more than the max that this module is going to allow us to do. So we can use the another instance of the sharpen module to sharpen it up even more. So if you look here, you've got two boxes. If you left click on it, you can create a new instance. Now what I've done is I've got my original sharpen. Now I've got a new sharpen 1 module where I can even sharpen it more. And so what I'll do is I'll sharpen that just a little bit more to get those fine details in there. Now, the sharpen does a great job at sharpening the bright details of your picture, but it doesn't do much for sharpening the contrast. There's another section to do that. So let's go ahead and do that. Left click on the tone group, and if you turn on the local contrast, you'll immediately see some extra detail, almost like you used a contrast slider. This will allow you a little bit more finite control over the highlights, the shadows, and the mid-range. I really don't mess with that for moons. I just maybe would move the detail up a little bit more. Now I'm going to zoom in with the mouse button. You can see I'm introducing a little bit of noise with all the sharpening. So we can get rid of that if we go back over to the correction group. I always use the profile denoise, and I still wouldn't use it at its full value. Let's zoom in here and take a look here. I'm going to turn it off. You'll see I get a whole bunch of noise. I'm going to turn it on. It gets rid of the noise, but it also washes out all my detail. So I don't want there to be quite as much denoising going on. So what I'll do is I'll look at the strength here. I'll click on the strength and I'll move it all the way down to 0 and see what that does. So that brings back a lot. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to turn it back on. And actually, even because the strength is way down to like 0.107, it's doing what I want it to do. I'm still leaving a little bit of detail in there, but it's getting rid of a lot of the noise in the picture. And when I zoom back out to my original crop, it looks great. So let's go ahead and close that. I think the only thing else I would do with it is it looks a little bit dark, so I may go into the exposure. I'll raise my highlights by clicking on the exposure button and moving it to the right. And you'll see that I start to wash out some of my highs here, but that's okay. I'm gonna move my exposure until I get my histogram so that it lines up right here with the right hand edge here. Now I'm also going to do the same thing with the black level correction. I want to move it a little bit to the left. Now when you increase your black, your histogram is going to move to the left if you increase it. So then that's what I want to do. I want to grab the black level. I'm going to move it over a little bit. And you'll see that kind of changing the range of value from the highest high to the lowest low in my picture. I'm going to turn it on and off here. You'll see a little bit of difference. So it's a little bit brighter with a little bit extra darks in there as well. I'm going to close the exposure. I'm going to go into contrast and brightness again. And I want to kind of make these white highlighted ridges here kind of pop out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the contrast here just a smidge. And you'll see I start to get detail here in the highs as well as here in the lows. And you could mess with the brightness a little bit. If it was too bright, you can move it down just a smidgen. Now, if you left click on these triangles and you move them around, then that's the coarse detail that you're adjusting. So it's pretty coarse. You can go left and right pretty fast and do some major adjustments. But if you want a more finite, if you get close with the coarse and you said, oh, I just wanted a little less than that, if you right click on these triangles, then you get this cool little graph. And now what you can do is move your mouse button left and right, and you get a finite adjustment detail. And you'll see that here is you can move it left and right, and you're not moving it a lot, just moving it in smaller increments. And you can have finer detail on where you want it to be. Then you just left click and it locks it in there. So this is basically it. This is the process that I do for almost all of my moons. The only extra thing that I would do that isn't really pulling out any of the detail in the moon, but is more giving you more pop, is make sure that my background is totally black. And we can do that with a vignette. So let me zoom in here. Sometimes when you zoom in, yeah, see that? You may not be able to see this in YouTube videos, but when you do this on your own and you zoom into here, you're going to see all kinds of noise in your black. And what you want is you want a solid black. So we're going to use a vignette around our moon so that it keeps our moon nice and bright, but the background ends up being totally black. So let's go ahead and do that. Again, I'm using my middle mouse button to zoom in and out of the picture. I'm going to go over to the last button here, the effects group, and I'm going to click on vignetting. And as soon as I click on vignetting, you see your circle that defines your vignette. So I'm going to scale it, and as I scale it down, you'll see this is where your vignette is going to start, and then you'll have a fall off, having no effect whatsoever, to full effect of the vignette way out here. So you can actually left click on the feather amount here, and you can move it in and out just by sliding left and right, and you'll see that. You'll see that there's a gradient here from this inside circle to the outside circle. Now everything past here is going to be more black. So what we want to do is we want to have that feather edge right on the outside of the moon so that everything outside that is black and the moon is nice and bright and gives us that pop. So let's make this feather edge almost non-existent. Let's make it really small. Let's scale this up so that it goes right onto the outside of the moon. Okay, I'm going to use my middle mouse button to zoom in here. And looks like I'm good on that side. Now, if you hold the shift key down and you left mouse button outside of that vignette, you can kind of move your screen around with this little finger icon. You got to hold the shift key down in order to do that though. And I see my vignette is not centered, so I'm going to just left click here on the crosshairs. And I'm going to move it over a little. And that looks pretty good. And let's see if I can fine detail this. Again, for fine detail, I can right click on it, remember? So I'm going to right click on it, And I'm just going to move it so that it goes just about right there. And then I'm going to left click and lock it in there. Now I'm going to do the same thing here, is I'm going to just move that in a little bit so that I've got it right on the edge of the moon. And that looks pretty good. I'm just going to close it so that I don't see any of the GUIs getting in the way of the circles there, the interfaces. And I'm going to turn it off and on, and you'll see I get another benefit here. I'm going to turn the vignette off, and if I zoom in here, because I did all that sharpening, you're going to see a white edge here on the moon that's pretty bright. But with the vignette turned on, you see that it knocks that down a little bit so that it's not quite as pronounced. You'll also see that everything past that vignette is now black. You can't see it probably in the YouTube video, but when I turn it off, this is all noise. Turn it back on, now it's solid black. So what you've done is you just really separated that bright moon from the black background to give it some pop. And that's really it. That's all I do when I process my moon shots. You can throw in some of the extra effects. Maybe you want to soften it a little bit. In the effects tab, you can click on soften, and you'll see it basically adds a haze again over the moon. But it's kind of cool. It gives you kind of a dreamy feel to the moon. And of course, you can use this mix value to tone that down a little bit if you don't want it quite as soft. You know, this almost gives the moon like a glow, and you can adjust that glow with the mix value here. I'm going to turn that off because I like the detail. I like the pop. Bloom also is another thing you can use. And bloom, rather than kind of softening the whole moon, will only look for the highlights in your picture. That is the brightest whites in your picture, and it'll kind of give you a glow around those the white areas of the picture. Kind of washes out the white areas, and I don't think it'd be very good for the moon, but it'd be good for other pictures. So now that you have the moon totally processed, how do you get that out of Darktable and into like a PDF or a JPEG or something? So we're in the Darkroom tab. If you look up here on the upper right, we're in the Darkroom tab. But if you click on the Light Table tab, you go back into this view. What we want to do is we want to save this new moon picture. We want to make sure that we have it selected. So make sure that you have the picture that you want to export selected. And once it's selected, come over here to the right, and you might have to slide up or down. There might be a slider here depending on how many things are open. And here's where your picture is going to end up. It looks like I'm going to save it in D pictures and then a file name. So let's go ahead and call this Moon 2, just in case I have something else. You can pick the file format that you want to export it in. PNG is fine. PNG 8 or 16-bit. Let's go ahead and go for 8-bit. I'm going to leave the compression at 9. And if you don't put a max size here, right, if you just leave that at 0 and you don't put anything in here, it's going to export that PNG at the full size of whatever your raw file is. Chances are it's way too large for you to put on Facebook or any normal thing. So what you want to do is maybe pare that down a little bit. And I found that if I put 2000 in here, that's a good size for Facebook. Now, because I put a max size of 2000 here, I don't have to put anything. Oddly enough, I can leave this size at 0 because basically it's going to keep the aspect ratio of the picture based on these 2000 pixels. So you can just, if you only want it to be 1000 pixels wide, then you can put 1000 and it'll keep the aspect ratio of your crop. So 2000 is good for me. All the rest of the settings are fine. I'm going to click on export, and it's just going to export the image. So it probably exported that image into D Pictures Moon 2. We can verify that, I guess, by bringing up my D drive. Let me get my D drive here, go into Pictures, and let's see if I've got a Moon 2 here. Yeah, there's a Moon 2. If I open it up, there's the exported PNG file of the moon that we just processed in Darktable. So have fun. If you do any astrophotography, I'd love to see some of your work. Put a link down below in the description. Tell me what you've been doing with astrophotography. I've really only been doing it for about a year and a half. I've concentrated on planets pretty much, but I'm hoping to do deep sky galaxies and all kinds of things. So let me know what you're doing. I'd be interested to hear about it. Thanks for stopping in, and catch you on the next one. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell. See ya.